Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To my respected lecturer, Dr. Umu and my fellow classmate. My name is Nabila Huda BINTI NASARUDIN, matric number 270X66. I will be presenting about racial segregation. Racial segregation is the practice of restricting people to certain limited areas of residence or to separate institutions, for example, like schools, hospitals, and other facilities such as parks, playgrounds, restaurants, as well as restrooms on the basis of race or unproven ethnic. Racial segregation provides a means of maintaining the economic advantages and superior social status of the politically dominant group. In recent times, it has been employed primarily by white populations to maintain their dominance over other groups by means of legal and social color bars. The racial segregation is deployed by the dominant group, such as colonizers that have governed certain colony. In order to protect their social status as a conqueror, they implemented racial segregation to legalize racial discriminations. Hence, there is a big difference between racial discriminations and racial segregations. Racial discrimination is an act against the law. However, racial segregation is the law itself, implemented by the rulers or dominant group. So, one of the famous racial segregation issue was apartheid in the South Africa. It was an official government policy from 1950 until the early 1990s. Apartheid, which means apartness in the language of Afrikaans, was a system of legislation that upheld segregationist policies against non-white citizens of South Africa. After the National Party gained power in South Africa in 1948, its all-white government immediately began enforcing existing policies of racial segregation. Under apartheid, non-white South Africans, which is a majority of the population, would be forced to live in separate areas from whites and use separate public facilities. Contact between the two groups would be limited. Despite strong and consistent opposition to apartheid within and outside of South Africa, its laws remained in effect for the better part of 50 years. How it started? The Great Depression and World War II brought increasing economic woes to South Africa and convinced the government to strengthen its policy of racial segregation. In 1948, the Afrikaner National Party won the general election under the slogan Apartheid, which means literally apartness. Their goal was not only to separate South Africa white minority from its non-white majority, but also to separate non-whites from each other and to divide black South Africans along tribal lines in order to decrease their political power. Later, apartheid becomes a law in the South Africa. By 1950, the government had banned marriage between whites and people of the other races and prohibited sexual relation between black and white South Africans. The Population Registration Act of 1950 provided the basic framework for apartheid by classifying all South Africans by race, including Bantu, which is black Africans, colored, mixed race, and white. A fourth category, Asian, meaning Indian and Pakistani, was later added. In some cases, the legislation split families. Parents could be classified as white and their children were classified as colored. Nelson Mandela, a person that played a significant role in fighting apartheid. He is the founder of Umkhonto weSizwe, Spear of the Nation, the military wing of the ANC, was imprisoned from 1963 to 1990. His imprisonment would draw international attention and help garner support from the anti-apartheid cause. On June 10, 1980, his followers smuggled a letter from Mandela in prison and made it public. Unite, mobilize, fight on between the anvil of united mass action and the hammer of the armed struggle, we shall crush apartheid. By 1989, Botha was pressured to step aside in favor of F.W. de Klerk. De Klerk's government subsequently repealed the Population Registration Act as well as most of the other legislation that formed the legal basis for apartheid. De Klerk freed Nelson Mandela on February 11, 1990. A new constitution which enfranchised blacks and other racial groups took effect in 1994, an election that year led to a coalition government with a non-white majority, making the official end of the apartheid system. In 1991, the government of President F.W. de Klerk began to repeal most of the legislation that provide the basis for apartheid. President de Klerk and activist Nelson Mandela would later win the Nobel Peace Prize for their work creating a new constitution for South Africa. One of the significant conventions regarding racial discrimination and racial segregation is International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, also known as ICED. ICED is a United Nations convention, a third-generation human rights instrument. The convention commits its members to the elimination of racial discrimination and the promotion of understanding among all races. The convention also requires its parties to criminalize hate speech and criminalize membership in racist organizations. The convention was adopted and opened for signature by the United Nations General Assembly on 21 December 1965 and entered into force on 4 January 1969. However, our country, Malaysia, chose to not ratify ICED. Why? Because ICED is contrary to the constitutions of Malaysia. Majority of the Malay were on fears of the convention allegedly compromising Bumiputra privilege and special positions of the Malay people and Islam in the country. Hence, in 8 December 2018, the anti-ICED rally or Himpunan Aman Bantah ICED was held in Dataran Merdeka. The rally was organized by opposition right-wing political parties Malaysian Islamic Party, PAS, and United Malays National Organisation, which is UMNO, with the support of various non-governmental organizations. Did you all know that there was once in our history where racial segregation was implemented? This occurred long time ago in our land during the British colonial era. It is known as divide and rule policy. The British colonial policy of adopting the concept of division and order is an action and has been the cause of the existence of gaps between races, both in terms of economic and racial polarization. For example, the Chinese live in cities doing business and also in mining areas as miners, and they actually have high assets in the economy of Malaysian society. While the Malays live in the countryside as farmers or small fishermen, the Indians were mostly government manual laborers and farms workers. In fact, the economic activities of the Malays and Indians are self-sufficient. This situation has caused the economic position of the Bumiputra community, especially the Malays, to be weak and left behind. The pattern of economic involvement between races in different economic activities has made their socio-economic position unbalanced. That is why, after independence, the authority to govern were in the hand of the Malays. So, they create a constitution to unite all the races as well as protecting Malay and Bumiputra rights. This was created with the consent of all leaders from different races. Hence, the Malaysia Constitution is not to discriminate others but to help and protect the Malays and Bumiputra. So, after the ICED come to place, a lot of Malays and Bumiputra were worried and their special right will be taken away. It is not that Malaysia are racist or want to segregate the race, but only to protect a certain right that the Bumiputra deserve as well as the Malay king. In conclusion, Racial segregation has been used as a tool for the governments to implement their authority in dividing and controlling the people. This kind of tactics is only benefiting the people in power and left the people in a harsh condition, as the example that I have given: apartheid and divide and rule policy. These sorts of policy will give a negative impact on the society and spread hate and injustice for people from different races. Hence, international community needs to gather together to apprehend the justice and human right for people from all races. So, that's all from me. Thank you.